College students, AI, and the matter of trust. Welcome back to Techstination. I'm Fred Fishkin. With us from the Institute for Cyber Law, Policy, and Security at the University of Pittsburgh is Director of Policy Research, Elise Silva. Hi, Elise.
Hi.
A pleasure to meet you. And you're part of a group of researchers looking into how AI is affecting students, how they're using it, and how it affects their relationships with other students and teachers. Give us a bit of an overview here.
Yeah, I think for the University of Pittsburgh, we really wanted to get to know our students and how they were using AI actually on the ground, boots on the ground. And I think that we found a lot of things that are reflected in other research. It's widely used. It's used for a lot of different reasons and in a lot of different parts of a learning process. But the things that interested us the most were some of these interpersonal relationships where we were seeing kind of vertically how students were differently interacting with their instructors because of AI, and then horizontally how they're differently interacting with their peers because of AI. And we weren't really expecting that.
So you did a survey?
It was a series of focus groups, nearly 100 students across our main and regional campuses.
So tell us about the key issues here and what you have learned.
I think that the key issues are that AI usage for undergraduate students is incredibly nuanced. They're using it for a lot of different things. But in terms of relationships, we're finding that students are differently interacting with their instructors, meaning they are kind of worried about being caught using it, but they're also worried about instructors thinking that they're using it when they're not actually using it. We also know that instructors are more wary of students, right? So there's like a distrust going both ways there, like student to teacher, teacher to student. And then there's a lot of kind of interesting wariness amongst students themselves when they're looking around at their classmates and thinking, well, I wonder if my peers are using AI and is that going to benefit them? Am I getting left behind if I don't, right? Or they're doing a group project and one of their peers uses it and then they feel a little bit conflicted. Do I need to turn this person into the instructor or not? But sometimes those policies aren't even clear, right? So there are like these relational issues and then there are policy issues, which we're also seeing where the policies are unclear. Maybe there's a blanket ban, but what does that even really mean when AI is integrated into a lot of different things today? When is usage licit versus illicit? A lot of those things are really confusing to students, and I think that institutions of higher education kind of need to figure out what their policies are and clearly articulate them for students.
It seems there might be a bit of a disconnect because, as you mentioned, the technology companies, whether it's Microsoft with Word or Google with search, they're building the AI tools into everything, it seems.
Yeah, a lot of students even actually talked about that they're irritated that they can't opt out. Does that, so that they're like, there isn't an easy opt out button. It's being pushed on me in a lot of different places. I open up my social media and it's there. I open up my Google search and it's there. And so if an instructor says you can't use AI at all, but AI is being integrated into things, what is a student to do? And I think that that's a really real reaction on the part of the students.
So, this gray area, do schools need to come up with their own tools for students to use and require that? And how is that enforceable even?
I think that that's a huge question. We even asked students, if you were making the rules, if you were making the policies, what would you do? And they were just as lost as I think a lot of policymakers are at institutions. I do know that Pitt is trying to make some of its own tools, and that is something that might be happening across other institutions of higher learning. What would be nice about that is if they had their own models, they could, privacy issues could be dealt with a little bit differently than if students are using free models that they're finding online and putting, personal information into them. But we found that students were a little bit distrustful of that even. And they said, if Pitt had a model of its own, which it is developing actually, well, then would Pitt just have all of my data? Will they be surveilling me? And so they're very aware of some of these issues, but there aren't really great answers right now. Some of them said things like, well, maybe we need to go back to paper tests, and blue book tests. And during these focus groups, we were like, do you really want that? Is that really what you want? And I don't think that they really want that, but they're not sure how it's going to work to get away from AI. They recognize very much that they need to have knowledge of their own, that when it comes to getting a job, that they need to be able to function, independently. Um, but they're also recognizing that this is a very powerful tool that has helped them in a lot of different ways as a tutor, to supplement their learning. And then also in ways that maybe are less good. They're up against a deadline and they don't have time to finish something, so they're going to turn to AI.
It's interesting, and we hear more and more that in the workplace, which is what the university is preparing the students for eventually, knowing how to use these tools is becoming more and more crucial.
Yeah, you're right. Students absolutely talked about that. They said, maybe I don't personally want to use AI or I dislike using it. Maybe I'm a selective user, is kind of how we talked about some of those students. But they did recognize that they might have to use it. And so they say, sometimes I use AI just so I'm familiar with it so that I can show to a future employer that I am an employee that can use these tools.
So talk about the mistrust and these other issues, the issues that arise between students and between the professors and the students, et cetera. How can that be dealt with or overcome?
I think that there are a lot of different ways. I think first acknowledging that it's there, honestly, like let's talk about the elephant in the room right now. That AI, whether you're using it or not, whether you're a student who has adopted it or not in your practice, is affecting your relationships. As a professor, whether you have use cases that you're allowing it in class or not, it's affecting your relationship with your students. You think about them differently now because you're worried that they're using it or you're wondering when they're using it. As a student, you're a little bit wary of your peers and how and when they might be using it. I think having more opportunities for things like experiential learning, project-based learning, where students in residential campuses like Pitt, where you can have more face-to-face interaction, or even kind of newer models of mentorship where students are working really closely with mentors or faculty members to do research. These are kinds of experiential learning things. So they're feeling a little bit more buy-in. We found that students turned to AI when they felt like they didn't have time, they didn't have capacity, or they didn't think that their learning was relevant. They didn't think the assignment was relevant. So it's very important for instructors and for universities to better articulate the value of what they're doing and actually have students understand that. Like, what is the value of what I'm doing and how is it going to help me in the future? And then students might be more willing to not turn to AI, because they think that it's whatever the assignment is a waste of time. So I think kind of like doubling down on kind of in-person interactions, different models of experiential learning, and really working for student buy-in, I think are important ways that we can respond to this moment.
I guess it's very difficult to skirt some of these issues because I don't know if there are classes where students are told use AI, but tell me how you're using it and let's get into it and what you think about what the AI is saying here, those kinds of things, because I guess it becomes more and more difficult to detect as the AI tools get better and better.
You're absolutely right. In fact, and you're reminding me that some of the students said what we really wish there were like really reliable tools to detect when AI is being used, because that would make it more fair, right? Then people would get caught who are cheating. And teachers would have a tool, but we don't have those tools. AI detection tools are notoriously unreliable. And they also noticed that it was different in different domains, so different disciplines. So students who would use it to code, for instance, would say, depending on how I do it, it's nearly impossible for my professor to tell if I'm using AI to help me code. Whereas students who used it to write said, I can tell when a bot is writing. My writing feels different. My teachers can tell a little bit more just because of kind of the homogenization of the language, and that's different, with coding. So you're absolutely right. This is a very difficult issue to skirt, and we don't have the tools yet to do that, and especially if we're talking about detection tools.
Do the companies behind the AI tools have some kind of responsibility here? What's the feeling?
I mean, I think that yes, they should have responsibility, but I think that what we're seeing is not unsurprising. I mean, yeah, it's not surprising in that we're seeing the companies invest in kind of lock-in. So let's make sure our products get out and are getting used by students. We're seeing a lot of companies kind of trying to get into K through 12 education, right? And so they're getting people using those products young and getting them used to them young. Um, and I just don't think that the incentives are there for them to be developing AI detection tools, the amount of money that's being spent there versus like actually developing the AI tools themselves. It's pennies to hundreds, thousands of dollars.
I guess bottom line, and everybody grapples with this. Is this something that's wrong to use, or is it going to become just so mainstream that we just have to become accustomed to it, accept it? What's the danger that AI is posing for these kids and the rest of us too, I suppose?
Well, I'm not gonna answer personally and like give a value judgment. What I'm gonna do is try to reflect what I heard the students saying, because what was really interesting is that students very much would justify their own use, right? They would say things like, I turned to it at this point, and they would justify that as being not wrong. But they would definitely point to other use cases that they thought were very wrong. They would say things like copying and pasting, that's plagiarism. If you're using it and it's usurping your learning, that's a problem. If you're using it instead of being creative, that's a problem. If you're relying on it and you get to the end of your education and you're not able to do things yourself, that's a problem. So I think there are some really interesting issues that are arising here where the students who are using it themselves oftentimes will justify that use and say, well, it's okay if I use it because I don't use it in these ways. But the ways that they said were problems or wrong were issues of completely plagiarizing, copying and pasting, when they're using it when in ways that would make it so they're not learning as well, or when they're not being creative, or somehow taking away, right, from like their creative selves. And then there were also, I think, other conversations about things like ethics, intellectual property, it's getting to take jobs. Students were also worried about the environment, right? These were other things that they would say, like, these are reasons why it would be wrong to use AI, or I try not to use AI.
Are many of the students talking about the benefits and how good this can be?
Absolutely. I saw a lot of, I think, especially international students very much leaning into AI tools as access tools, right? These are tools that help me. I can write in my native language and then I can translate. It allows me to be heard and to understand better. These are tools that like people in my life use and they have better access to learning. And there was some definite excitement about it in that sense, saying like these are tools that I can use. They're personalized. They're tools that are up 24/7, right? I don't have to wait for my instructor to wake up in the morning. I can ask ChatGPT at 2 a.m. my question. And so I think that immediacy, access, and access to learning were some of the ways that students were really excited about using them.
Really fascinating. Is there a place people can go to for more info on the work that you and the team are doing?
Other than my piece in the conversation right now, we don't have anything public. We have an internal report, but please do look out for our names because we are working on a series of academic articles. So soon to come, hopefully.
So necessary. Elise Silva, thank you for taking time with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.